Not quite a minute, but I guess now is as good a time as any. So we'll go ahead and get started today. And kicking everything off, I want to welcome everybody to our first webinar of the year. This is going to be a regular occurrence. We're going to be doing these typically the last Thursday of the month, unless otherwise stated. We felt like the best way, though, to kick off 2021 was really just to do some baseline cybersecurity awareness training, hence the discussion today. Now, there are a number of people maybe on the line today who have been through similar trainings, either with us or otherwise. And then there are those individuals that have never been through this. So we welcome all. I'm sure that there are things that can be revisited here and just some handy reminders and best practices. And for those that have never been through any sort of training like this, hopefully this will get you up to speed and provide you with a good solid foundation on cybersecurity, what it is, and what it means to your organization, and best practices on what you can do to ensure that you do and are adhering to the highest standards when it comes to cybersecurity, at least within the best of your ability. So, in getting things started today, my name is Chris Montgomery. I am the Director of Sales here with ThrottleNet. I've been with the organization now going on about a decade this year. With me on the call today, I also have AJ Rogers. She will be fielding our Q&A. So if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to enter those questions in the Q&A section of our chat, and we will do our best to answer those either as we go or towards the end. And if we have to get back with you on something, of course we will. As we outline our agenda for today, we are going to be covering a number of things. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the state of cybersecurity going into 2021, essentially outlining why it is that we are doing this today in the first place. We're then going to talk about most common types of cyber attacks and some security definitions, not necessarily in that order, general best practices, and how to safely browse the internet and securely check email. And then we'll wrap up with any questions that might be outstanding still, or we will talk a little bit about how ThrottleNet can help organizations to address some of the needs that we're going to be reviewing this morning. So, in kicking things off, let's talk a little bit about the state of cybersecurity right now. In 2020, there was a new ransomware attack roughly every 14 seconds, and they expect that to then be roughly every 11 seconds going into 2021. So needless to say, that is why it is so important that organizations adhere to good best practices as it relates to cybersecurity. The weakest link in any network chain is typically going to be the user. So if the users can be updated and aware and educated on exactly how to protect their organizations from an outside attack, and what to look for in the event of a phishing attack, ransomware attack, or otherwise, they're going to be much better prepared to deal with those issues as well as to get ahead of them before they really create some problems for the organization. Cyber attacks overall have cost organizations $10.2 billion in victim losses reported. Now, there's a very specific reason that word reported is an italicized print. That's because a lot of these things go unreported, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. But of those that have been reported, $10.2 billion has been reported in losses due to things like ransomware attacks and bad actors compromising the networks that are out there that our organizations and other organizations use. So we can go through and talk corporate data breaches, personal data breaches, credit card fraud, and everything else. And a lot of this is coming in, obviously, through email accounts, identity theft, and investment fraud. But our core today, again, is going to be really just around how do we securely surf the internet and how do we identify phishing attacks via email and in general. As far as business email, speaking of which, what you're seeing here is a pretty substantial increase in the amount of losses due to business emails being compromised. That's why the vast majority of our discussion today is going to be around email. But again, fraudulent transfers of money, as well as obtaining PII, personally identifiable information that can be used for future attacks. As you can see here, essentially since about 2017, this has been on an upswing with a bullet, to say the least, going from 5.3 billion all the way to 26.2 billion. Now, industries that are consistently under attack. When I was preparing for today's webinar, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little surprised by what I found here. I always knew that finance and healthcare were consistently and constantly under attack. However, when you talk in terms of those two verticals, they are typically subject to third-party governing bodies, specifically finance through the SEC and the cybersecurity checklists that they have assembled, and healthcare through HIPAA and the different cybersecurity requirements that HIPAA puts in place to ensure that your personal healthcare PHI information is protected. So it was a little bit surprising to see that manufacturing, legal, and construction were also in this top 5. But if you think about it, it shouldn't surprise anybody. When you talk in terms of manufacturing, I work with a number of manufacturing companies in the St. Louis area. And in working with them, I could tell you that they could tell you for every minute that they are down, exactly how much money that is costing their organization in output and productivity. Because of that, that's why it's all the more important for those organizations to get back up and online quickly. Bad actors understand this. They know the ramifications and the potential cost to a manufacturing facility, and they figure it'll be a quick transaction. So these are organizations that we probably want to target. When you talk in terms of legal or law firms in general, in a lot of cases, they are smaller, 5, 10, 15 user firms. They don't have the same protocols in place as a larger firm might have, but they're still dealing with PII, personally identifiable information, social security numbers, names, date of birth, all that good stuff, that if a bad actor were to compromise a server or network and collect that data, obviously that could be used at a later date for attacks against those individuals that the data was collected around, or more specifically, to have it then for resale on the dark web. And then finally, with regards to construction, again, very similar to manufacturing, you have a lot of folks that are out in the field. You take down a network, you've put a construction firm pretty much at a dead stall. And as a result, they are probably going to be willing to do whatever it is that you ask as far as remittance of payment or otherwise to get their organization back up and online as fast as possible. Now, why don't we hear about more attacks in the small or in the SMB space in general? Well, there's a variety of reasons. First off, it's not really newsworthy. I mean, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 2 is typically not looking to report on a cyber attack that occurred within a law firm or a financial services company here in town, unless that firm was a large, multi-state, multinational company of some kind, or unless it was a large retail organization like a Target, Schnucks, Deerbergs, those organizations, you always hear about it. But for the run-of-the-mill, what comprises 80-90% of the businesses out there in your SMB space, it's just not newsworthy, and it's not really going to see itself, getting a lot of reporting. In addition to that, it is really embarrassing to admit. I mean, nobody wants to admit that they were compromised, and I can understand why. There are so many things that can come with this whenever something like that occurs. For example, the PR is an absolute nightmare. Obviously, you do not want to get this in the paper or on the news because the clients and organizations and individuals you might do business with, they catch wind of this, may have serious concerns around exactly who they're doing business with. So again, the PR is just an absolute nightmare. And as a result of that, then you potentially have legal ramifications. The next thing you know, you potentially have somebody wanting to take you to court because they feel like their data or information may have been jeopardized, and that was 100% on you. So as a result, again, you typically do not hear about these things and they go unreported. Now, why is that? Well, for the most part, people in the SMB space just don't think it's going to happen to them. They feel like, look, they are coming in and targeting a very specific type of client, and that client is not me. I have got 10 or 15 employees. I do 5, 10, 15, $20 million in gross annual sales or in business. And at the end of the day, that's really not who they're targeting or looking for. Well, you're right. They're not directly targeting you, but as we talk through some of the definitions and different types of attacks that can occur, they are still targeting you, but just in a different way. Okay. In addition, expensive. Okay. They look at it and say, well, you know what? How much is it going to cost me to make the investment in these additional security features and functions, the hardware, the software, whatever might be required? And in so doing, is that going to outweigh, the investment, the potential for something like this actually taking place? So again, there is a cost associated with it. Anytime you put in place strong security measures, you are potentially looking at increasing your spend in order to do so. And just like insurance, it is one of those things where, do I make this investment and feel confident that if something were to happen, I'm covered? But it's always going to be a balance. Does the investment outweigh the concern, vice versa? So again, it makes sense as to why folks will look at it this way. You want flexibility. free and inexpensive, and you want unrestricted resources. Again, I fully understand. But as an analogy or as a discussion I used to have when I used to be in a different industry, which was very specifically the security industry, residential and commercial alarm systems back 20 years ago, one of the questions that I would ask folks whenever they would tell me that a competitor is coming in and giving them the alarm system for free is, how much faith would you put, or do you put, in anything that you've received for free? And the reality of it is, the answer was almost always, well, no, Chris, I mean, it was free. I would never put that much stock in something like this. And when it comes to your network as a business, you don't want to use free solutions if you can help it. They might be fine in the short term for a smaller organization, but as the organization grows, you typically do not want to use free solutions. You want to get in place best in class or enterprise grade solutions that are typically going to have some sort of recurring or one-time investment in order to get that solution in place. And then finally, trust that your IT company is providing you with everything that you need to protect against cybersecurity, or I should say to protect against bad actors and cyber attacks. That said, we as an organization, of course, we have firewalls in place, we have antivirus in place, we have ransomware detection mitigation tools in place. We have a lot of different tools in place to assist organizations in preventing attack, identifying attack, remediating attack, wherever the case might be. But there is no 100% foolproof scenario where you put together, this is the package, once we overlay this, you are completely and totally protected from any cyber attack or bad actor attempting to compromise your network. Because at the end of the day, even if all these things are in place, you still have the people element associated with this that ultimately can compromise your network unknowingly. And once again, that's the reason that we're having the discussion that we're having today. Okay? So 46% of SMBs have been targeted by ransomware, and 73% of those have paid that ransom. And cyber attacks now cost companies about $200,000 on average. So once again, all the more important as to why we're having this discussion. And as far as just a general case study of an organization, a small law firm that was actually affected by a ransomware attack, this firm actually had CrowdStrike come in to investigate the ransomware infection and uncovered this. I know CrowdStrike has been in the news because this was from December of 2016. And I know that in the last year or so, you've heard different things about CrowdStrike. But either way, they are still a reputable organization. And as a result, they do some diagnostics and forensics. What they found was this organization had 5 million encrypted files. They paid $25,000 plus in ransom. The backups were corrupted because anytime a ransomware attack occurs, typically the first thing they're going to do is go out and corrupt or encrypt the backups to ensure that the organization has no place to restore from. They were down for 2 weeks. Again, I don't know of a lot of organizations out there that could survive 2 weeks of being just completely down and dead in the water. And finally, based on how much data they had to restore, it took 39 hours per terabyte to restore everything and get them back to even again, hence the fact that it took them 2 weeks to do so. So again, this gives you a pretty good idea leading up to our next phase of discussion as to why we're having the conversation today, what's going on in the marketplace, and the reasons that organizations need to be concerned about cybersecurity and potential for cyber attack. So we're going to segue off now into security definitions. I want to provide you guys with just a general understanding of just some general definitions around security. And we're going to talk also about the different types of attacks that occur, ending with the one that we see most common. So when we talk in terms of definitions, we're going to start with encryption. Okay, essentially what encryption is you have point A and point B, this being you, the user, let's say, and wherever the network or whatever it is you're communicating with happens to be located. As that information traverses back and forth, you want to make sure that data is fully encrypted as it goes back and forth. What this does is prevent somebody from essentially inserting themselves in the middle or listening into these conversations, and as a result, gleaning that information. So again, encryption is just the act of everything being encrypted in a certain way where it just looks like gobbledygook, ones and zeros or what have you as it goes back and forth, in turn not offering up any personal information, financial information, or otherwise. Data integrity ensures that as this data is going back and forth in its encrypted state, is that it's not corrupted. Okay, the data it has good, solid integrity, and that the data is not being manipulated, managed, or changed in any way, shape, or form as it's traversing back and forth. Authentication is that process of identification. Is you are who you say you are. So you go out to a website, you go out to your banking or financial institution, they want to authenticate, are you in fact the individual that you say you are? So again, authentication protects against man-in-the-middle attacks and builds the trust between the user and the organization that they're actually communicating back and forth with. And then finally, two-factor, otherwise known as multi-factor MFA authentication, okay? Two-factor authentication is something that you are going to see more and more of, and you're going to see more and more organizations beginning to adopt. Multi-factor authentication, for those that are not aware, you've seen it, you've used it, you probably use it every day and don't even think of it in these terms. Multi-factor authentication can be defined as using your thumbprint scanner on your phone. That could be a form of multi-factor authentication. It could be the facial recognition feature on some of the different iPads and Apple devices that are out there for people to be able to log in. In addition, the old RSA tokens, I haven't seen one in years, but I'm sure there are some on the call today who remember what I'm talking about, that every 30 to 60 seconds would change the number, and whenever you go on, you'd have to key in whatever number was up at the time. So again, multi-factor authentication is a way, a redundant way, if you will, or a secondary way to identify you are, in fact, who you say you are. Final way that I see it happening is text message. Inevitably, I log into my website or something along those lines for my bank, and they send me a text that I then have to key in a 6-digit code that they provide, random, that then identifies that I am, in fact, who I say I am. So again, you're going to see more and more of this as time goes on, because this is one of the primary ways people are securing against bad actors in cyber attacks. Now, what are some of the most common types of cyber attacks? Now, I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of these, but we'll scan through a handful, but we'll get down into the real meat and potatoes of things here towards the end on these. So you'll hear these thrown around occasionally. A denial of service attack is going to be one where the system that you're logging into, network, whatever it might be, has been completely overwhelmed. The system resources have been overwhelmed, and it cannot respond. It basically just shuts everything down, prevents it from doing anything, and freezes everything in a point in time. Man-in-the-middle attacks, this is where we talked earlier about encryption and data integrity as that data flows back and forth. That prevents against things like man-in-the-middle attacks. These are attacks that occur, again, when a hacker inserts himself in between the user and whatever it is they're communicating back and forth with, and then in turn gleaning information off as that individual is communicating back and forth. Password attacks, there's two different kinds. A brute force password attack really just means more of a random approach, just sitting there and essentially going through and trying different password combinations based on things like a person's name, their job title, things along those lines, things they may have picked up over time, to ultimately try and figure out exactly what that username or password combination is going to be. And then there's a dictionary attack. This one is one that is a little bit more complex in nature. It's basically using a dictionary of common passwords to attempt to gain access, but then there's also a way where you can kind of bounce this dictionary off of other things and do a compare and contrast, and that's going to filter out some potential username password combinations that a bad actor might be able to try. But the ones that we typically see are going to be brute force attacks, things along those lines. So an example and why brute force attacks are so simple is that even I, as a salesperson, could go out hypothetically looking for email addresses, and I can type in 3 or 4 different combinations of email addresses just guessing, and inevitably, probably 80% of the time, I'll find it out there somewhere on somebody's website. So again, going in and keying in and manipulating those things can ultimately result in a brute force attack. And again, that's an easy thing that we can overcome when we talk a little bit more about complex passwords and some of the things we'll get into around best practices later. Eavesdropping attacks, these are where they're basically listening in. Again, this is why data integrity and encryption is so important. Again, is to prevent somebody from eavesdropping and listening in on a conversation as that information traverses back and forth. Drive-by attacks, we're going to talk about this today as well. These are typically attacks that occur unknowingly to the user because they go out to a specific website and they end up contracting some sort of a malware infection without even clicking or doing anything. And we'll get into that in a few minutes here as to exactly how that occurs. It can also occur when somebody downloads things from a site that has been compromised. And usually those sites are compromised in large part because the user, or I should say the hosting organization, or the organization, the business that actually has that website, has no idea that that code has been compromised. And that results in things that a lot of us are familiar with, which are malware attacks. Malware attacks occur, again, via a drive-by download, but they can also occur when you go out, for example, like I have in the past, where I went out to download a specific font. When I downloaded the font, with it came a bunch of other minutia. And then when I went to get online the next time, I had a bunch of pop-ups coming up and everything else, to the point that I couldn't even see my screen anymore. So again, that is a form of a malware attack. If that ever occurs, it's a very easy fix and easy to clean up. But at the end of the day, it can be a real pain while it's actually going on. Spear phishing, and then finally regular phishing. And I really want to talk about this one for just a couple of minutes, because this is the one that people really believe is what's happening to them. So when they say, Chris, it can't happen to me, what they envision is there's a guy out in the parking lot, or there's a guy sitting in a basement somewhere in a dark room, and he's just decided he's going to target XYZ company, and he's going to go about collecting as much information about them. He's going to start scraping the bottom of the barrel, just really get deep into this organization to understand how they operate and better understand exactly what they're doing. And these can be very hard to identify, because at the end of the day, these spear phishing attacks can be ongoing for a very long, extended period of time. Again, this, I think, is what comes to mind for a lot of organizations and business owners, is that, oh yeah, there's some guy out there that's directly targeting me. Well, here's what I can assure you. For your small to medium-sized businesses, unless you're in financial services or otherwise, chances are pretty low that that's what's happening. What most people are subject to is the next iteration, which is just a general phishing attack, okay? General meaning that they are just sending out as many emails as they can with attachments or links contained within, hoping that somebody will click on it or do something with it and ultimately get caught up in their net. And as soon as they do, that's when they start interacting and engaging with those individuals and organizations, and ultimately that's when the problems occur. So again, to be abundantly clear, spear phishing is an organization or a bad actor that is targeting an organization very specifically and going in and investing a lot of time doing research and attempting to gain access to that network. And in some cases, gaining access and just sitting back and collecting data over a long period of time. Whereas a phishing attack, what we're going to target our discussion around today, is very broad in nature and can apply to anybody, and is probably the most common type of attack that we see out there. So before we get off into best practices, I'll pause for just a moment here and make sure that we don't have any questions. It does not appear that we do. So we will continue to move on here into how to safely and securely use the internet. All right. So in getting things started here, first thing we want to do whenever we're out online is we always want to make sure, especially if we are communicating any financial or personal information or data, that you are on a secure website whenever you do that. Your banking sites are always going to be secure. Most of your payment sites are going to be secure. So again, you want to make sure that you are on a secure site every time that you're communicating back and forth with any data that, if it were to be compromised, could cause a serious problem for either you as a user or for the entire organization itself. That said, the way that you identify this is you always look for the S at the end of the HTTP when you look at your address bar, or you're going to see a padlock, typically somewhere in the browser window. It's going to be to the left or right of the address bar, maybe down in one of the corners. But again, make sure that you're on a secure site. In addition, to be abundantly clear, if you're ever on a non-secure or insecure site, and you want to make a purchase on that site, or you want to transact in any way with information that is of a personal nature, make sure that they offer a secondary option to make payment or submit that data. So for example, if you're wanting to make a purchase, usually sites that are not secure will run through something like PayPal. Use PayPal. Use that as an option when you're making your purchase, because PayPal is going to take the out of their site to a secure site for your transaction, and then back to their site to complete it. But none of that is happening within their insecure or unsecure environment. Browser ads, essentially pop-ups. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. I don't see as many pop-ups as I once did, but again, pop-ups are something that can be very malicious in nature. They can be, in some cases, just a form of malware, or they can be pop-ups that occur on specific websites that you might visit. We would always encourage folks, if they can, try not to interact with these if you can help it, but more importantly, put in place some sort of a pop-up blocker to block those from coming up. It's been my experience that typically when a pop-up comes up, there's usually not a significant amount of benefit to it. However, there are those times, just so folks are aware, that you might be on a financial site or something along those lines where you have to enable pop-ups just for that site in order for a login pop-up to prompt or something along those lines. So there will be instances where that's the case, but we would always encourage folks to use solutions like uBlock or AdBlock Plus to block these pop-ups from actually occurring and causing a potential problem. Varying your passwords. Okay, I have done a number of these trainings over the years. I can't even really tell you how many times I've asked the question, which is, how many folks use the same username and password across all or multiple sites they visit? Inevitably, the number of hands that go up in the room are in direct relation to what the studies show. About 60%, or 6 out of 10 individuals, use the same username or password combination across all or multiple sites that they visit. What that means is if a bad actor were to figure out your username and password combination for one of those sites, they could in turn have that information for every single site that you visit, and obviously that could be a major problem. So make sure that you vary those passwords. Now, what I hear consistently, and I understand because I'm in the same boat, I can't even begin to tell you how many usernames and password combinations I have just for email, and that doesn't include just trying to get into my phone, all the different accounts that I have. It is absolute insanity. So what I would always encourage people to do is to look at a password vault like LastPass or Dashlane. The nice thing about these password vaults is that A, they give you the ability to store all your passwords in one secure location that you can access with one password, or you can access with just a thumbprint scan or something along those lines to get in. In addition, those solutions can also create passwords for you. And the benefit to that is that puts you in a position where in a lot of cases you won't even know what the password is. It will just pre-populate in advance using that solution. They do have browser plugins as well, that in the event you're online, you can also access the same password vault, and it will pre-populate your username and password in those different sites that you visit, in which case they have the information. So again, that is one way to kind of manage what has become a bit of a management nightmare, which is how many accounts do I have? How many usernames do I have? How many passwords do I have? And you're telling me I have to vary all of these? I mean, if I've got 20 or 30 of these, I feel like I have, that is almost impossible. And I understand that. So again, leveraging a third-party password vault application is always going to be helpful in that regard. And being creative with those passwords. Again, making sure that they are complex in nature. What I mean by complex is they usually are going to have a capital letter, they're going to have a number, they're going to have a symbol. Those are the kinds of things that make it a complex password. But in addition to that, studies have shown that you typically want to have a password that is at least 16 characters long in order for it to be at the highest level of security and limit the potential for the password to be compromised or cracked. All right. Now, how do you create a complex password that's 16 characters that you're ever going to remember? In my experience, what I have found is that things like movie lyrics, song lyrics, or say movie lines, song lyrics, I tend to use things like positive affirmations. So that way when I start my day and I actually log into my computer, I have something nice to say about how the day is going to go. So again, you can do any of those things. But when you do it, make sure that it's always started with a capital letter, that it has all spacing in between each word, and that it has proper punctuation at the end. This will allow you to achieve a complex password that is easy for you to remember going forward. So again, make sure though, the real takeaway here is that the password is at least 16 characters long, and then it includes a capital letter, if ideally, if it can, a number, and a symbol. And in some cases, what I'll see people do is they'll use like the letter E and turn it into a 3 or something along those lines. So again, best practices, make sure it's 16 characters or more and make it complex. Do not use autofill, okay? Autofill can create a variety of problems, largely because this information can cache on your PC, essentially be stored on your PC. And in the event something is compromised, you could find where those passwords could be located by an individual or a bad actor. So as a result, again, this comes back to either leveraging a third-party solution like LastPass to help you remember those passwords or pre-populate those passwords, because again, if those passwords are stored locally on the machine, it can cache, and as a result of that caching, it could be compromised in the future in the event that machine itself were to be compromised. Do not click it. This is one as we click through here. I know everybody has seen this. Excuse me, got a little ahead of myself. With these pop-ups, if you ever see this happen, this is most likely a malware infection of some kind. So when it occurs, first of all, do not interact with these pop-ups. If you think you're closing it by clicking on the red X up in the right-hand corner, the folks who have come up with these have gotten smart enough to know, and they just basically, anything that you click on within that window is going to start potentially causing problems, downloading something in the background or otherwise. So if you ever have an instance like this, where you're getting pop-ups just because you're online, you need to really pretty much just shut your browser down. And if you're a managed services or just any client of ThrottleNet, reach out to us. We can remote in and clean up that malware infection or whatever it is that's residing in your local desktop, laptop, or otherwise to get you back to even again. But again, the true takeaway here is do not run this. We as an organization provide all of our clients that are on our managed services program with an antivirus, anti-malware, anti-spyware solution. And it is not going to pop up like this asking you to run any updates or telling you that you're unprotected. We monitor, manage, and maintain that solution for you in real time. So again, I say that because don't ever think that it's us or our solution that is popping up. It is inevitably a malware infection of some kind that is creating the problem. Couple of other tips, just be safe and just be sure that you pay attention when you're on a search engine as to what the results are that you're clicking on, and always keep an eye out for shortened URLs, numbers, hyphens, and special characters, stuff like that. What I would tell most folks is this: when you're out doing your research online, we in the US here are familiar with things like .com, .net, might even be a .tv or .mobi. These are all here in the United States. However, if you're out online and you inevitably come across a site that's .eu, .au, .cn, those types of domains, those are from overseas, and that is typically where you're going to have problems like the drive-by downloads that I had talked about earlier, things along those lines. So if you're ever in a situation like that and you're doing some research and you happen to come across a site and you notice that it's a .cn, .eu, or otherwise, see if you can't locate the information elsewhere. We do provide some filtering or at least protection against that for our managed services clients to prevent them from going to malicious websites that have been blacklisted. But again, there's never a 100% guarantee, and we would always encourage you to get your information domestically as opposed to going abroad. Okay? So that gives you guys some general ideas on just best practices around getting online, going out, visiting websites, how to vary your passwords, how to interact and engage online, and what you should be paying attention to. But again, you do have a fraction or a portion of bad actors and cyber attacks that do occur just through general online browsing. But the vast majority really take place, as indicated in the earlier slides, outlining the launch into compromised business emails through email. So that's what we're going to segue off into right now. I'm going to take a look here and see if we have any questions. It does not appear that we do. So moving on, we will talk then about how to identify attacks when using email. So we need to establish before we go there what social engineering is. If I were in a room full of 50 people right now, I'd be able to ask by a show of hands what social engineering is, but since I'm not, all that I can do is really provide a definition. The best definition, though, that I can give are examples of social engineering. It makes a lot more sense when you know what it looks like as opposed to just the definition of what it happens to be. Examples of social engineering would be you're in the middle of a really busy day And your phone rings, you answer the phone, and on the other end of the line, the individual says, hey, I'm Chris Montgomery. I'm with your IT company. I'm doing some updates and patches today, but for whatever reason, we don't have your password on file here. Can you give it to me real quick? Again, you're busy. You're trying to get on with your day. Yeah, it's ABC123. Do you need anything else? Nope, that's it. Great, thank you, and you hang up, okay? You don't even know who you talked to, all right? You were just hurry. You were in a rush. They were taking advantage of this fact. They knew full well that you had a lot on your plate or that you weren't going to question it, and as a result, they now have your creds, okay? Another example in more of a physical sense would be you come walking up on a large building. You work for a company that employs 200 or 300 people. And as you approach the building, it's card access only. So you come up, you swipe your card, and right behind you is an individual holding a whole stack of boxes that can't get to their key card. And they say, hey, would you do me a favor and hold the door for me? And I got my hands full. So you go up, you hold the door for them, you let them in, and you think, well, I'm just being courteous. But at the end of the day, you don't know if they were authorized to be there in the first place. You don't know if they actually did have a key card. But again, they were taking advantage of human curiosity. So that's what social engineering is. It's taking advantage of people's curiosity. It's taking advantage of just them being respectful to others. It's just taking advantage of just general human nature and using it to their advantage in a bad way. The final form of social engineering that we see out there, especially online, are phishing attacks, okay? And that brings us into why we're talking about phishing attacks today and how to identify them. So when identifying a phishing attack, there are some pretty telling signs that most likely this is not legit, okay? One such sign is the from address is odd. Now you'll see over here to the side that this shows as rack space, but what it also shows is this weird info.9912, so on and so forth, when you would expect it to maybe say info@rackspace.com or sales@rackspace.com, all right? Now, the reason for this is this email address has been spoofed. So on the surface, it appears to be from Rackspace, but if you hover over the address, you're going to see a completely different address. That is one of the easiest ways to identify whenever in question or in doubt whether or not this is a ransomware attack. So my point is that if you can go out and you're questioning whether or not this is from who it says it's from, just hover your cursor over it and it will actually show you the actual email address. And if that email address looks like a hot mess like this, then chances are that is not actually from Rackspace. It is from some sort of a bad actor trying to compromise and secure some data. Inevitably, there's going to be some unprofessional punctuation. Again, a lot of times these are performed overseas. So as far as how they are communicating, it's going to be slightly different. And as a result, that is usually a tell. There are a lot of times errors in the grammar, the capitalization is off, punctuation is off, something's just a little odd about the way that it was written. There's almost inevitably a link to an external website, or there is an attachment, one of the two. And then finally, there is going to be the use of a threat to promote immediate action. If you don't do this, in this case, within 24 hours, this link won't work anymore. The ones that I've also seen is, we're trying to reach you to collect money. And if you do not click on this link within this amount of time, some sort of legal action is going to be taken against you. So again, there is always some use of threat to promote action on the part of the end user. So in talking in terms of just some examples of what we have seen over the years, one is an example would be one with an attachment. Okay, in this case, what they're trying to do is to prompt me to click on the attachment because it says, see attached the payment report to Funds Express. We would see this, or somebody might see this and say, oh, well, this is a payment. I need to make sure that we look at this. Maybe I should forward this on to accounting. And at that point, now it takes on a life of its own because they look at it and go, oh, this must be legitimate. It came from somebody within the organization. So if you ever get something like this, take pause for a moment and think, who is this person and why would they be sending me money? And should I really click on this attachment or should I just go ahead and disregard it and go ahead and delete this thing altogether? I would encourage you to disregard and delete altogether. Again, that attachment is when most of your problems are going to occur. So if you can avoid clicking on it at all costs, by all means do so. Another example would be what you see coming from trusted sources these days. I mean, let's face facts. There are some people, I hope not on the line today, but there might be a few, that haven't been out much over the last 9 months. I'd say most of us haven't been out much over the last 9 months. What I wouldn't do for a night at a concert or something, or a movie right now. I can't even begin to tell you. But because of that, we are using things like Amazon. We're ordering a lot more online. We're using services like FedEx, USPS, and UPS. And as a result, we are constantly getting updates from these organizations on the status of our purchase, the status of our shipment, all that stuff. And as a result, it's very easy, because you're getting so much stuff these days via mail and through different carriers, to just go ahead and click on the link that they send you, or click on whatever attachment they send you. But ultimately, that's where the problems can occur. These bad actors have gotten very good at taking what you see on the screen here from FedEx, UPS, USPS, and otherwise, and creating emails that look identical to those that you would normally see for an update on tracking or otherwise, with the idea they know full well you are receiving a lot of stuff in the mail or via these different carriers, and then inevitably somebody's going to click on that link to see what the status of that respective purchase happens to be. And then, of course, that's when your problems are going to occur. So if you receive something like this, I would always encourage folks, go to the website itself, key in the information there, the tracking information that you have, and do the tracking through that. In addition, and as most know, in order for you to get tracking updates, you typically have to say that you want them. So especially with USPS, FedEx, and UPS, you have to actually click on it. I want these types of alerts. I want to know when it was shipped. I want to know what the transit status is. I want to know when it was delivered. I want to know where it was delivered, all that good stuff. You typically have to go in and choose those, as well as what form of communication is going to be used to notify you, text messaging or via email. So again, if you have not done that, and then you get an email like this, we can pretty much rest assured that's a phishing attack, and you want to avoid it at all costs. So again, I would always encourage folks, if you're ever getting an email like this, take pause, do not click on the links or attachments within, go out to the website for that organization, key in your tracking number there, and get your information directly from the website, because we know that's a trusted resource. Okay? Phishing attack from overseas. This one, again, is why I talk about being conscientious of what the domain or the address is. And I realize that this is an older one, and it seems pretty easy to identify, but I have it up here for a different reason. First off is that I wanted people to see the .cn, because again, you see the .com, .cn, that's coming from China. I think it goes without saying, especially when you see the characters that are on here, that's most likely coming from somewhere in Asia. In addition to that, and the reason I always bring it up here is because people ask the question, well, why don't you just block it? Why don't you just put it up there and block it altogether with your spam filter or otherwise? And the response that I would give to that is, I can't, because they use numbers here. I tried to block this thing more times than I can count, and every time that I did, they would just change one digit. And obviously numbers go on for infinity, so they would go from at 8733 to 8734, 35, 36, 37, 38, and this can go on for infinity. Now, eventually it just stopped, but I got one or two of these a day and would block it every time, and inevitably it would resurface again with just a slight variation in the email address that it was sent from. So again, there are times when it just doesn't work, okay? Largely because they're using numbers as opposed to just a standard domain name using letters that you would normally see. This is one that I hear about more often than I'd like to admit. I've actually got an example towards the end here of somebody who tried to do this with me. In this case, it's where a phishing attack requesting a wire transfer or gift card request. Inevitably, what they're trying to do in this case is that they are collecting information, or they are trying to get you to take action and see what you'll do. And hey, listen, let's start the conversation. Once they have somebody engaged in the discussion, at that point, what's going to happen is then they'll start to engage you in the process of doing the wire transfer to them, as opposed to an organization that you may have thought it was going to in the first place. In addition, how you could tell hypothetically if this was not legitimate is Mike Heil is the president of the CEO of ThrottleNet. So if I saw this and just saw the name, I would say, oh, it's from Mike. I mean, of course, I can help him. Here's the thing. If you look at this in more detail, you'll notice that our name, ThrottleNet, is spelled THROTTELNET as opposed to LENET. So again, the way that our minds work, and I know that people have done this over the years, you tend to fill in the blanks on what you expect to see. So that's why it helps you to take pause when it comes to these things, take a moment, really look at the email that it's from, and you'll notice these slight variations in the characters that at a first glance might appear to be fine, but at a second look, wait a minute, something's not quite right about this. So again, that's how these things happen, and that's how folks get compromised. Okay. This is one that's attempting to gain information for a future attack. Okay, so here's one where, again, now it looks very legitimate. I mean, Mike@throttlenet.com, that is his email address. Okay, and in this case, he's asking me, I need you to take care, or he was asked, I need you to take care of a financial obligation for me today. What do I need? Okay, this is what they're looking for: account numbers, routing numbers, all that good stuff, credit card numbers, whatever it might be. So again, you ever receive an email like this, pick up the phone and call the individual that it's from and make sure that they in fact requested this information. Now here's the rub. These bad actors have figured out that you're going to pick up the phone and call to find out if this is the information that was requested or not. And they're even going to say in the email, do not pick up the phone and call to find out, because you know what, I'm in a meeting all day. Don't heed that. Pick up the phone and call. And the reason I always encourage that is because I do not know a business owner on the planet who wouldn't rather pause for a moment and take that call to verify and confirm who they are, as opposed to you taking action, taking the company Amex card and buying $2,000 in Apple gift cards, scratching them off and providing them into an email to a bad actor. So again, take the time, make the call, make sure it is who they say they are, and that this was actually a legitimate request that was made. Okay? Now, to segue off, I'll give you an example of how incredibly petty these individuals can be and how much they just will not give up. Okay? Right before the holidays, right before Christmas, I actually had somebody try to do this gift card scam on me. All right? They pretended to be George Rosenthal. George is actually on the call today. George is the president of ThrottleNet. But as you'll see here in the highlighted area, yeah, I came across as George Rosenthal, but it was from managerexecutive1210@gmail.com. They were just spoofing George so that hopefully I wouldn't pay attention to it. Now, as I was having this conversation, and since I knew out of the gate this was not George, I got a little snarky with the guy, because first thing he asked me for is my cell phone number. And of course, I come back to him and tell him, you know what, I've worked here for a better part of a decade, and it's really insulting to me that you don't even have my cell phone number. Okay, I think I'm just going to quit. I don't want to work here anymore. He goes into apologies and tells me how sorry he is. I tell him still that I'm quitting. And then I tell him, you know what, it's okay, man. You know what, I've calmed down now. I went out for an afternoon happy hour. Now I'm back to my desk. I think we can get this done today. What do you need? Okay. At that point, oh, I need a gift card from you. Oh, great. Okay, that's fine. I can get you a gift card. That's no problem. But I'm busy. What can I do for you? And then from there, he asked me to go out and buy $1,000 in $200 increments of Google Play gift cards, come back and basically take pictures of them and send them over. Of course, I then question that because, well, I just don't get, I can't do that. I don't have any money in my bank account, you know what? And reimbursement's tough. So he goes so far as to say to me, what can you do? I tell him $100. He doesn't care. He's like, great. Can you arrange that for me the next 10 or 15 minutes? I'll take the $100. So again, they do not care what the amount is. They just want to start the conversation, and even $100 is better than nothing at all. So as we continue, we pretty much just end with me divulging the fact that we are, in fact, a cybersecurity organization. And at the end of the day, I know exactly what this individual is doing. And all that I can hope is that I prevented him from doing it to somebody else, because this went on for about 3 or 4 hours of us going back and forth. And at the end of the day, he disappeared, never to be heard from again. All right. Couple last items. Ignore unsolicited links in emails. So again, this comes back to that idea of anytime that you receive an email with a link or an attachment contained within, avoid it at all costs. So in addition to that, do not log into accounts where either a link was received in an email, on instant messaging, or social networking. So for example, you don't see it as much anymore, but on occasion you might get a message from a long lost high school buddy that you haven't talked to in years with some sort of article that you really don't have any interest in, but they think that you do. And then when you click on the article, another pop-up comes up that says, hey, I need you to log in to view this. you're already logged in the first place. Why would you need to log in again? That's because they're wanting to collect that data, that information around your username and password. Why? Because they know on average 60% of the population is using the same username and password across all or multiple sites that they visit, and they stand a pretty good likelihood of figuring out your username and password combinations for other sites that you might visit. So again, if you're already logged into a site or otherwise, don't go back and log back in again. Just recognize that is most likely some sort of bad actor out there trying to collect or glean data from you. And as a result, just go ahead and close it out. About the last thing you could do there, especially on social media, is send a quick message back to your friend and say, hey, I think you've been compromised. A quick fix to that is just changing username and password again. Once they do, the problem typically just goes away altogether. Okay? And then finally, do not fall for it. Okay, I have had these calls made to me on more than one occasion here at work. I've had them at home, but they are inevitably the same. It's a call from Microsoft tech support saying, hey, your computer is doing some weird stuff, so we're reaching out to you today to see if we can't remote in and resolve whatever the issue happens to be. Okay, the reality of it is Microsoft is never going to reach out to you to do a scan of your computer to try and identify problems or anything along those lines. For anybody on the line today who has ever called Microsoft for technical support, you know full well that you're going to be on that call and on hold even at 2 in the morning, probably for a few hours, all right? The likelihood that just one day they've gotten so far ahead in call queue that they are now proactively reaching out to all of their users, which is pretty much 80 to 90% of the population, is pretty low. So again, if you ever get a call from somebody claiming to be from your help desk or claiming to be from Microsoft, hang up, okay? If they say they're from your help desk and you're a ThrottleNet client, say, listen, can I call you back? What number can I reach you at? All right, and then call back. And you will inevitably be able to find out pretty quick whether or not that was a legitimate call or not, okay? So that gives everybody some ideas on best practices, at least 12, around how to safely surf the internet, as well as how to identify phishing attacks and how to safely and securely check your email, as well as some additional items on top of that around what you should or should not do, depending on if you get calls from Microsoft tech support or otherwise. So as we wrap up here, and hopefully it's been beneficial for everybody on the line today, we'll just cover briefly that, of course, we can help at any point in time. If you ever have any concerns about any of the things that we've covered today, we can most definitely help you. Just give us a quick call, toll free at 866-829-5557. We'd be more than happy to assist. In addition to that, how we help organizations out there in the marketplace is through a variety of different solutions that we offer. Everything from managed services, where we service the full-time IT department for your organization, providing you with antivirus, anti-malware, anti-spyware solutions, backup checks, remote maintenance, monitoring, management, and much more. We also, of course, provide hosting solutions and standalone cybersecurity solutions, such as mock phishing attacks, to get your users to identify these attacks when they occur and to give them additional training whenever they come up, as well as things like enhanced advanced threat protection through spam filters, and a variety of other different solutions and services that we offer as an organization. So, in closing here, and I see we have a couple of questions, and I'll address those in just a moment. If you ever have any desire to learn more about us, of course, check us out online at throttlenet.com. Or once again, you can call us at 866-826-5966, another number that we use on a regular basis. And we are more than happy to help with any needs that you guys might have. So as we wrap up here, let me just take a quick look at the questions here. Looks like one question that we had came in was, is there a certain way to remove a suspect email, or can it just be deleted? So Bill, to answer your question, just delete it. Okay, now when you delete it, it will go into your deleted items, and you would have to delete it from there as well. But again, the only way that it's really going to cause a problem in most cases is if you interact with it. So don't click on any links, don't click on any attachments, and definitely don't do what I've seen people do in the past, which is don't forward it to the company as a live link and say, hey, this is a phishing attack, don't click on this. That's just inviting people to click on it. So again, an easy way to do it is just delete it and then delete it from your inbox, and there is no likelihood or probability that's going to get any worse. So hopefully that's given you an answer to that one. Aside from that, I don't think I have any other questions. Let me take a look here. Looks like anything else that I'm getting is just tips and tricks on how I can improve my webinar going forward. So these will all be heated going forward. Again, this is our first one of the year. Unfortunately, I have a lot of sun coming in, and I think it's washing me out a little bit on the screen. So I apologize for that. But I can promise you, as I'd said, these will continue. We will be introducing these every the last Thursday of each month. The next one is going to be on Active Directory. Okay. This is going to be a pretty important one for those individuals and business owners out there that are not familiar, because what we're going to be talking about is how Active Directory, which ultimately dictates who can access your network, is being compromised these days and what you can do about it to protect against it. So without further ado, we will wrap up here today. I do appreciate it. On behalf of George, AJ, and myself, we certainly appreciate you participating today and joining us. And again, if you have any questions, needs, or anything else, feel free to check us out online at throttlenet.com. You can email us at sales@throttlenet.com, or you can get us on the phone again at 866-826-5956. Once again, I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you again here in a few weeks to talk about Active Directory and what you can do there. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day.